Welcome, one and all, to the Ferret and Raccoon podcast, episode 193. I am your one and only host for this podcast, the Angry Raccoon, bringing you the first podcast of June 2022. And yeah, it's been quite a interesting and very eventful last 2 weeks, especially in England, but also around the world. A lot of events, a lot of things to, discuss, celebrate, think about have been happening over the last few days. Me, myself, I haven't necessarily been partaking in, the main thing that's been happening over here in England. That is the Platinum or Royal, however you want to refer to it, Jubilee, as the current Queen, is celebrating, her life, the fact that she's been Queen for so long, a record-breaking achievement, if you were, to some extent. But that's been happening. I was up at London, and I did kind of see the crowds and see the celebrations, and it was nice to some extent, but I also saw a lot of really foolish and just odd behavior to some extent, and just people taking it a bit too far in some regards. You'll probably maybe see some of that within the footage that's going to be over the video counterpart of this podcast, as I was up there to film a scene, if you were. But yeah, that's been happening. Also, I want to say, happy Pride Month. I know it is a bit weird saying, happy this, happy that, especially with something that should be accepted and respected year long and all the time. It is unfortunate that it is just delegated to just a month, but I will say anyway. It's been a pretty, I don't know I was about to say it's been a pretty good month. We're only a few days in, but yeah, I know discussions and matters on, people that fall into that, group are going to be discussed. And I think, if you're someone who doesn't really understand it, doesn't really know much about it, educate yourself this time and just kind of, figure it out, because it's not going anywhere, really, at the end of the day. But the other thing I wanted to mention as well is the unfortunate fact that the war within Ukraine is still continuing. It's been over 100 days since it started, which is a very sad fact. And I think what bothers me the most is that the inevitable still hasn't happened. I think we all know how this war is going to end, with Russia either surrendering, being defeated, or much worse happening to that country. It's going to happen, and it sucks that it's not over, because both sides, and maybe some other countries who are not necessarily linked to the war, are struggling in a lot of ways. I mean, in Russia, they don't, and I think won't have something like McDonald's, for example. That's gone, because as greedy as a corporation as McDonald's is, they want nothing to do with that country and its government, which is really unfortunate. Because when you think about it, one person's actions has essentially made it so that one whole country can't relax or really gain any comfort right now. Sure, no one's attacking Russia, but you're not getting any. They're not getting anything. They're not getting any support. God forbid happen to the people. God forbid if anything happens to the people over there, no one's going to help them. No one will help them, and that is incredibly frustrating when you think about it. And I mean, something needs to be done. I don't know who's going to do it, but something needs to be done, because it's quite problematic for a lot of people. This stems way further than just issues with NATO and an old man who won't refuse to die, basically. Something needs to happen really soon, because it's getting a bit ridiculous now at this point. It's just senseless, and like I said before, it's just frustrating. Hopefully, in the next coming podcasts, we can not have as many dour things plague the world. Well, it's realistically just one person at the end of the day right now. Plenty of awful people in the world, yes, but it's this one person who has all the limelight, and it's not deserved. But let's move on to some news stories. I didn't really do anything in terms of watching things. Well, I say that I did watch one series, but I'm actually going to save that for next podcast, and I'll explain why towards the end. But the first story we're going to talk about, trailer, is going to be for the Menu. Now, this is one of those kind of, you don't know what's going on, there's some kind of twist, some kind of reveal is coming, and I mean, finally we have a cooking-based horror film that I have been asking for. And what do you think the twist is going to be? I've been thinking about it, and I'm just Is it going to be as obvious as cannibalism, as in like, eat the rich metaphor? Is it going to be commentary on like pretentious food and like meal standards? Because that is a thing where you get like, I'm sure everyone's seen it within fiction or just other examples where you go to these like gourmet and gorgeous restaurants and, you presented with the food and it's just like a tiny little thing and it just comes across as just so full of itself in some sense. Or is it going to be like some kind of critique on like modern art? Or maybe even is it just going to be like a boring horror film with a dumb twist, as a lot of these films do tend to be. I mean, as great as a lot of Jordan Peele's films have been, he's kind of almost like caused a massive issue with a lot of films, especially like horror or thriller films, in that everyone kind of has to have like a really dumb twist that you weren't expecting. I mean, M. Night Shyamalan has been doing it for a long time and arguably failing every single time he's done it since The Sixth Sense. Oh, that's such a tongue twister of a name. But yeah, I know it's meant to be like foreboding, but like every time they shout "Yes, Chef," I was just constantly reminded of Hell's Kitchen with Gordon Ramsay. Like I was half expecting like the head chef to literally shout like, "Where's the lamb sauce?" I mean, that's just me just incorporating just like so many like silly things, just kind of like making fun of this trailer because it is a really odd premise in some regards. But to be fair, it's different. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't interested. I mean, there is like a creepy like hive mind element with like the chefs and how like he just like slaps his hands and they all turn around and they all just immediately respond. Granted, it is kind of like that in a lot of high class restaurants to some extent. When the head chef does say something or give you a command, it is like you do that right away. That's kind of how it is. It's how you become successful or how you even make it to, let's say, that position. So that's accurate and that's interesting, and how they've kind of morphed that into something that you can consider as being like quite creepy, like I said. And you do kind of see like one of the there's a shot where one of the guys just runs for his life, which is quite interesting. Plus Anya Taylor-Joy is in it, so yeah, it should be interesting. She's a fantastic actress, and it's always nice to see her in roles, no matter what she's going to play in this. But yeah, it is an interesting film. I'm sure, well, I'm hoping it's going to be good to some extent. But yeah, let's move on to the next trailer, and we've got to do our obligatory let's talk about Disney products section of the podcast, which is unfortunate, but what can I say? First is going to be for the 2022 remake of their adaptation of Pinocchio, which, geez, what a mess, unfortunately. I mean, I wasn't expecting much from a Disney remake because all of them, except for maybe a third of one of them, have been just painfully awful and just unnecessary. No one is really begging for these. I mean, if there are people begging for them, like, let me know so I can, come and talk to them or give them a slap. But yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people have already made this joke already, and I'm going to say it again, but kind of like add my own twist on it to some extent. And I honestly do want Tom Hanks to say to Pinocchio, "You are a toy," and then look right into the camera and possibly wink. Because, yeah, that would be a funny and very, very, very stupid nod to the fact that, he is Woody from Toy Story, and that, I mean, they're trying so hard to hit you with the feels, and they want you to be all, like, nostalgic for, like, all the fun moments and all the magical wonder that happens in Pinocchio. Despite the original being, like, one of their more disturbing films in some sense, like, I wonder how watered down this one will be. Because, yeah, I can straight up see there being not a lot of scenes that they're going to include in this one, because I'm sure someone in higher up management is going, "Nope, can't do that, it's too scary. Nope, can't do that, it's too weird. Nope, remember, this is a children's film. Children need to be able to watch this. We've got to maximize our profit and make it a U." I'm not saying this film or this remake has to be like dark or super fateful, because my argument is use that money, make something original. But it does feel like a waste when, I know they're going to, just water it down, like I said. And I mean, visually this film is all over the place. Like, the backgrounds are nice, but they're too pretty. I mean, Geppetto is not a wealthy man. I understand it's his craft, it's his shop. It would have a, look of being presentable, but nothing comes across as like, dirty or of the time, much like the original film kind of captured that aesthetic of, it wasn't, modern day time. It wasn't like everyone was, living in a great situation. Like, even the way some of the scenes in the backgrounds, it was kind of like put together to some extent in regards. And I mean, the CGI looks unfinished right now. I'll get into that in a sec. And yet, like, Tom Hanks, although he's like a little too close to like the original character, and he kind of has like too much of like a good cosplay look to some extent. Like, it doesn't look believable. It looks like, like I said, a good cosplay, like a good fan made costume. And he does kind of look like the typical like Hollywood old man. Like, the makeup and the costume is nice. It looks pretty good, like actually what's on his face to some extent. It's just really weird because they really try to incorporate like the animal characters into like a realistic setting, but they look ugly and out of place. Like Figaro, like Honest John, like Gideon, like, they don't work here. They look like they don't belong. Like, to some extent, they almost look like monsters in this film. And I don't know whether that's like how they've animated it, because clearly whoever has animated this has, might not have had the right context or the right regards for how these characters are going to be presented in the world. Like, the lighting is off. Like, the character models look very dark to some extent. Like they've not been lit by the world they're actually in, and there's just this massive disconnect. And I mean, yeah, it was odd that we had like a giant anthropomorphic fox and a cat talking to Pinocchio, and like everyone else was a human. Like, I get that, it's fantasy, but to be honest, you could have just hired someone else to play those characters, because in original adaptations, they were just two guys, they were con men. So, but then again, it goes back to the whole idea of if they change something, people are going to panic and freak out, so they have to keep it accordingly. And then it just goes back to my whole argument of take that money and make something more original. But yeah, no, I'm not interested in this film at all. It looks very disappointing to some extent. But then again, that's Disney for you. Next, I'm going to tread really carefully with this one, is going to be for Willow, the TV series sequel or continuation. Here's a teaser trailer for it, based on the film that came out a little while ago. I've never seen Willow, and this trailer hasn't inspired me to watch the original. I'm more of a Dark Crystal fan, but it looks alright, to be honest. It's a very safe and generic trailer. It opens with like the drone shot, vague narration, nothing special here, but I like the fact that it has a more simple fantasy aesthetic. Like, it doesn't seem like it's trying too hard to show, concepts that don't make sense or don't look right. Roughly everyone's a human, good people, bad people, fantasy-like costumes. It's safe, which is fine, in comparison to how some people go about doing fantasy, and it's just all over the place. Would it be trying way too hard, and it just becomes like an ugly, like, CGI fest. So I'll give the film this, and maybe how this series looks is accurate to the film. Once again, I haven't seen it. I mean, I'm happy that fans are getting a continuation, and I'm sure Disney will be respectful to the franchise, just like they were with Star Wars. Next trailer we're going to talk about is going to be for The Princess, which is a cute idea, like a princess, damsel in distress character, but she's actually a badass girl who can like kick ass, and oh my gosh, look at her like punch this guy, and oh, she's maybe going to say a swear word. But it is a bit painfully obvious that this film's like whole inception is based on Shrek. I know that sounds weird, but I mean you got a badass princess. It's a not what you expect fairy tale kind of setting. And they even use like Bad Reputation by like Joan Jett, who, part of the Pretenders. And also that same song was used in Shrek during a combat scene. So some odd connections right there. And I mean, despite, the fun action scenes, they lack a sense of like raw weight and punch. Maybe it was the way the trailer was mixed, but nothing really felt like it hit to some extent. Like, it looked like it was, well choreographed. It actually looked quite fun in a lot of regards, but it's kind of clear that they wanted to be more violent, but at the same time, like, it's a film for children, so they probably had to downplay certain concepts, and that might end up hurting the film and making it somewhat of a forgettable film that, maybe not even the children or girls who go and watch this even remember by the end of the year. But that's how it goes sometimes. But that's it for, I guess you could say, trailers or film trailers. Now we're going to move on to the Sony State of Play for the 2nd of June 2022. This kind of just came out of nowhere for me. I always find out about these streams, events, like literally like hours before they happen. And it was an interesting one. I think Sony delivered or showcased, a good selection of stuff. I mean, if you're a massive Sony fanboy, I'm sure you must have come out of this just ecstatic, beaming smile and all that, which is good. I'm happy for you at the end of the day. But we got to talk about the things that I want to talk about, and things that matter. And let's just talk about the big one, because this is the thing that I think everyone is going to be talking about anyway and talking about until it releases. And that is the final announcement and reveal of Resident Evil 4 Remake. They finally showed it off. I mean, they're remaking arguably one of the most important and greatest games ever made for a lot of people. This game holds a special place in the industry, I guess legacy or history, a special place in a lot of people's hearts. This is a big deal, like I said. And that reveal was clever and classy. Like, it got me hyped the moment I saw the words formed. But at the end of the day, I know this is going to be such a big game to follow. Because, like I said, this is coming off of one of the greatest and most famous games ever. Capcom cannot afford to mess this up, and from what I've seen, I don't think they're going to. I think they know what they're doing. Obviously, I know people are worried about remakes in terms of the previous remake, which is Resident Evil 3. I know a lot of people didn't like that. I like that game. I don't think it's amazing or as good as the second remake, but I really don't understand a lot of the negative reception it got. Like, it's just bizarre to me that people disregard everything that is good with that game just because a whole section was not in the game. I think that's really poor criticism, and to some extent, given some of the writing videos, really poor writing. It's just jumping on the fact that a lot of people didn't like this one game. I mean, the same thing happened with Cyberpunk 2077. You can watch tons of reviews on how bad that game is, but when you really watch them, is anyone really saying anything of any value? No, they're not. And it's the same when people talk about this remake. I'm not necessarily defending it. If you hate it, fine. If you like it, good for you. But at the end of the day, I think its criticism or its negativity is really not deserved. I can write a better review in half the time that some of these assholes have taken to, just jump on the bandwagon once again. But rant over. We got to talk about right now, or what's happening in March when this game releases. And this trailer doesn't show much, mainly like memorable visuals, but what has me excited is all the implications and changes they're going to be making to this game, because this is not a remake, this is a reimagining. This is what would Resident Evil 4 be like if it was made today. People need to remember that. The box of the game does not say remake, it says Resident Evil 4. Okay, Capcom, as far as I'm aware, have never really referred to these as remakes, officially. They may have said it in articles, but I don't think they regard them as that. I think they are more accurately reimaginings, because, I don't mean to rant, but like, to go back to Resident Evil 2 and 3's reimaginings, so many people were so upset, like I said, about the fact that the clock tower was not in that game, yet no one complained when a whole section in RE2 was not there. Like, I don't want to spoil it because I want everyone to go and play that game, but yeah, a whole section got redesigned and trimmed down and almost cut, and no one batted an eye. That wasn't an issue for anyone, but taking out one whole section in this game apparently was an issue, but you know what, maybe I'm just crazy. One of my biggest dislikes with the original, being Resident Evil 4, was that it wasn't really scary or horror-based. It was ambient at times and frightening, yes, but these moments were far and few between. It was an action game, and that's fine. A lot of people like that. A lot of people do regard this game as the series' downfall, because after 4 we got 5 and 6, and then we kind of had to have like 7 to kind of, bring back the horror, the survival horror, and 8 as well. So I have heard reports and rumors that they are apparently going to be amping up the survival horror, and you kind of do see it in this, as it feels like they're bringing back that missing, survival element, that missing uneasy, not sure what's going on kind of element. And, it is drenched in a lot of atmosphere. We don't see a lot of gameplay, but, some of those shots of like Ashley, or I believe that is Ashley, running through the forest, Leon kind of walking, through the village and stuff like that, just how like dark and somewhat saturated, like oppressive and almost depressing a lot of the environments are, I think works really well, because a lot of Resident Evil 4 was a little bit too brightly lit in my opinion, which is fine. I get it. You're not in like, a mansion or a police station where it's late at night. I get it. But it does look like they're going to bring that back, and I think that might be the one thing, if anything, that can trump the original. Not that I care. Hopefully they're both as good as each other. I know that when this game comes out, people are going to hate it because of all the changes they make, and because, got to jump on that bandwagon and talk about all the differences they made, and, fall down the hole like, oh, how Resident Evil 4 fell from grace and how it lost its edge. And, anyone making those kinds of videos are not worth your time, because it's just pandering rubbish for the YouTube algorithm. But, I mean, I'm hoping that the side characters have a bigger role in this game. I would love to play as Luis, Ada, even Ashley. Having more sections of her, I think, would be a really good idea. It would add a lot more variety to a game that had a lot of variety. Granted, some of that variety got a bit silly, especially when you're on like, what is it, that big car or tank, and you're like shooting people, and we can get rid of that, and let's play with a different character and do different things. Have Ashley play a different way. Let hers. Well, here's an idea I think would be kind of cool. You see her running, and her sections could either have you needing to survive for as long as possible, and you've got like 15 bullets. She's just found a gun. She can barely use it. Like, her aim is intentionally terrible within the game. Like, you yourself controlling her, you can't aim the gun. You've only got 15 bullets, like I said. Or, like, you need to run and hide until Leon, comes to save you to some extent. I think that'd be a really cool concept. Like, a cold open, a prologue to some extent. And I doubt that they're going to make her a damsel in distress in this game. I just don't see that. I don't think she's going to be like a badass, like helping Leon and like fucking doing suplexes and that. But I don't think she's going to be caught as many times as she is. I think, if anything, she might just... I think they'll probably downplay a lot of the escort mission aspects with her to some extent. Maybe when it comes to a boss fight, they might just literally have her just not be there. Because, yeah, you'd have to be stupid to take Ashley into a boss fight. But I hope that's what actually happens. And given some of the changes they've made within the... I believe it was the Resident Evil 4 VR version, they've actually, like, altered some of the dialogue to be a little less outdated, and especially in regards to more inappropriate, like, sexual themes towards Ashley. Like, I think Louise said something to her... I think the line is something along with like, oh, I can see she's been equipped with certain assets, and she obviously like corrects him about her figure, and I think that line's gone. I think there's one with Leon where he says something to Hunnigan, which I hope is actually in this game, and I think that's been cut. It's minor things. It was a product of its time, and I don't think any of that will still be there. This Leon, he does seem like he's going to be a lot less jokey, especially given that even in that opening scene when he's in the car, he seems like he's still quite troubled by what happened in RE2, which I think makes sense. And hopefully, I would love to see some elements like that happen. I'd love to see those games get referenced, as well as other things. I know apparently there's also like a connection or a reference to Resident Evil 8 somewhere in that trailer, but I haven't found it because I don't believe in clickbait stuff like that. But yeah, no, I'm really excited for this game. I actually cannot wait. I know it's going to be on more modern consoles, being like PS5 and Xbox One and PC, so I don't know how I'm going to play this game. I might have to go around Ace's house, because he's probably going to get it on PC, so yeah, I'm really excited for this. And also, there's apparently going to be a Capcom event very soon, I think in between, before I do the next podcast, so maybe we'll see more details on that. Also, there's the Resident Evil 8 DLC, so... fingers crossed we get something on that. Maybe that will hold me over until Resident Evil 4 comes out, which is just under a year away. But I've talked to death about this game. But let's stay with survival horror and talk about another game. And that is going to be the Callisto Protocol, which I still don't think is a great name for this game. It sounds really odd. I don't know, maybe it'll make more sense when I actually play the game and things get revealed. But yeah, the Callisto Protocol, aka Dead Space 4, as it's taking a lot from that game's original concept. I believe maybe one person or a few people who worked on the original Dead Space, they're working on this, so it kind of does feel like these guys know what they're doing. They kind of maybe keeping their cards a little too close to their head, to their chest, but we shall see at the end of the day. But I mean, being set in a space prison, that's a pretty scary idea already. Like, that has me on board right away. And this game is so gross, like, in a good way, and I love it. Like, it's not afraid to be ugly or brutal, and I respect that. So many games, especially people making games that they want to pretend being survival horror, they kind of pussyfoot around with that, and they don't want it to be too ugly or too dark. And I think if we are going to, or if people are going to push the medium, actually do something different in terms of storytelling, we need more things like that. We need more things like, you know, Martha is Dead, or I'm trying to think of the other game. I know it's by the developers who did the game Detention, and their other game they did, which you know, got banned by the Chinese government because they can't handle criticism. And yeah, we need more stuff like that, and I appreciate that. I know when the Dead Space remake comes out, it is going to be the most straightforward, safe remake. We can't show that thing ever. But I do appreciate this game just kind of just going all out. And I mean, the narration at points over this trailer was a little bit cheesy, but I think it worked to some extent. It kind of, I guess it kind of built up the setting and the environment, which I think was a pretty cool, you know, I don't know what you call it, like aspect or whatever, but yeah, I thought it worked. I don't know if it's like just a matter of the dialogue or whoever this character is, because obviously there's going to be like weird, you know, cultists or people who've just lost their mind. It's just, oh, we're going to do the rebirth or whatever, or whatever they, you know, call it, much like in Dead Space, but that went a little bit too far in, you know, the second and third game. But yeah, hopefully this game doesn't make the same mistakes. And I mean, the prison going to hell setting and like the story have me the most interested, because like the gunplay they show is a little too tame for me. Personally, I would have liked to see something a little bit more melee heavy. Maybe that's going to be a thing, but given how vicious these enemies are, yeah, I can't imagine, you know, you whacking them with a pipe doing much. And it's a great looking game, honestly. Like, I hope we get like really disturbing death animations and that you can like stomp a guy's head in. I think that would really help, because, you know, once again, we don't really see too much like that. We're not going to get it from Dead Space, and we're certainly not going to get it from Blooper Team's Silent Hill game, because, you know, that is going to be disaster. When that trailer hits, oof, guaranteed hour-long podcast. Let's talk about the last trailer now, and that is going to be for Street Fighter 6. This is the announcement trailer, actually showing off more. And although I'm not a big fighting game fan or really a big Street Fighter fan, I'm actually feeling this. This is what the series needs. Something new. Sorry, excuse me. And I think the open world online element is a great idea. Like, sure, like I think a Naruto game and a Dragon Ball Z game, maybe two, had something similar to this, but here it works because it fits into the game's title and the themes of like traveling. The idea that you can potentially pick your favorite character, or maybe you can only pick certain characters that live in America, for example, and, you know, just kind of traveling. Maybe you literally, you know, go and pick fights, or, you know, go and make money. I don't know how it's going to work. It is an interesting concept, even if it isn't like the main point of the game, because obviously we're here to fight to some extent. Obviously it's about the online and that net code, and hopefully it works. And I mean, the animations and the combat look great. I'm glad the ink effect is like more prominent, a little bit more colorful. It does have a slight like graffiti-esque look, which I think is really cool, especially as it fits into, I guess, some of the design elements that are, I'd imagine, are going to be on the box when the game does release. The only thing I don't really get about this trailer is why the new characters. Now, Street Fighter has a lot of characters which they can pull from. It does seem a bit silly creating new ones, especially ones that look like generic all-around beginner characters for like new players to specifically play. Like, that's not a bad thing, having a way for newcomers, especially younger people, to get into the game. That's perfectly fine. It's just, if you want like a cool poster boy character, why not Yin and Yang? like, they're pretty cool. They'd be an interesting representation, especially given that they are American, but not necessarily of American descent. I think, just their whole dynamic, being brothers of martial arts, I think that kind of really works. I mean, that's worked with things like Mortal Kombat. So, yeah, I don't really get that. Maybe they'll be in the game, hopefully, fingers crossed. But I'm glad they changed the logo as well. Like, it looked much better than the previous one, which looked like an app, with like 6 updates needed. So it's looking pretty good for this game. I'm actually really excited to see how this game fares. I hope it's big in terms of that open world, and I hope it's got like a lot of variation, because I would imagine Capcom's aim is to have this be a game that lasts several years. They're probably going to have it be bare bones from start, and then like, every month or so a new character. Hopefully not so much, because Resident Evil, sorry, I've still got it on the brain. Street Fighter 5 was very lackluster from the beginning, and that really hurt that game, unfortunately. So hopefully they can redeem themselves and make something a little bit better this time. But yeah, that's pretty much going to be the podcast. Yeah, it was quite a strange one, quite a not necessarily packed filled, but yeah, a lot of things to discuss on this, and a lot of hopeful things to some extent, especially those 3 games I mentioned. There were a lot of things that were also shown off at the State of Play, and I'm going to link the full presentation in English in the description and download link if you want to watch the whole thing for yourself and see everything else that was shown off, because I'm sure there's things that other people were interested in, but I didn't want to talk about every single thing, because yeah, this podcast would have been a bit too long to some extent. But yeah, that is pretty much going to be the podcast. I have the video of the episode, and as it is Pride Month, I want to link something that is a little bit leaning more into themes and ideas and representation of that. So the video of the episode is going to be Dorian Electra with Guyliner. This is a song that they released on their first album a couple years ago. Still a fantastic song and a great music video, which you will hopefully enjoy. But yeah, I will say for the next podcast, once it does get released later on in June, it is going to be the halfway point of 2022. So I am going to be talking about some of the best and worst things so far that I have enjoyed. So look forward to that. And yeah, there isn't really much else to say about this podcast. I would say, stay safe for the most part. Be respectful of people, no matter who they are or who they want to be at the end of the day. Be sensible, especially if you're going to be celebrating the Royal Jubilee. And yeah, just be smart at the end of the day. The world's in a really odd position right now, so just be smart about things and how you go about saying things and doing things, because yeah, I think everyone's a little bit too tense right now for understandable reasons, and hopefully things will get better really, really soon. Hopefully I'll be able to talk about more positive, relevant things in regards to the human race and the world on the next podcast. I can only hope. But on that note, I will end this podcast like I always do by saying I was the Angry Raccoon, and I will see you on the next podcast.